Thank you. Just for your information, this meeting is being recorded. I would like to start with our introduction of our speakers. Now, our speakers today represent two directions of Polaroid. Mac, who led the company from 1985 to 1995, but obviously had a history before that, was there during the creation of the vision that we call Polaroid. Chris Bodanos has written a history of Polaroid, but is also going to address Polaroid as it goes into the future. I obviously am looking forward to both aspects, learning about from whence I came and where my energies are still going. So I think we're in for a very exciting presentation. I'd like to start by thanking the Direct Federal Credit Union for their support of our luncheons, for their support of the Polaroid Retirees Association. And I would like to introduce them, but would ask them to just raise their hands so that as I call your name, Joe Walsh is President and CEO. Michael Ferrer, Senior Vice President, Chief Member Officer. Traffic seems to be a problem this morning. Cassandra Martin, Assistant Vice President of UX Architecture, Design, and Analytics. Just remember these names as we go along. Steph Bernstein, Digital Experience Manager. Amy Horan, Senior Vice President, Chief Lending Officer. They must all be in the same car. Andrew Gabriel, Senior Vice President, Chief Operating Officer. Kristen Johnson, Senior Vice President, Employee and Brand Experience. And Jim Weber, Vice President, Enterprise Security and Fraud Management. Where is Dawn? You want to come up to introduce our next guest? As Dawn is coming up, would the members of the board please start to come to the front to assemble for the next few minutes of the program?
While the board members are accumulating up here, I'll take a moment to publicly thank our friends from the Lakeville Cable TV company called LakeCam. My colleague Jose Invencio is over on this side of the room, and David, where did David go? David Montero. David's over here on the left. These folks are making the video recording of our meetings as they've done for the last few years so that we can post these online, and remote retirees, folks who are in California or Arizona, can log in and see what's said here. So thank you very much for the time to come up and do this. Oh, yes. And I also want to acknowledge Kathy McMiniman. Kathy is here with us this morning. Kathy is, Kathy's late husband was an employee, Jerry Scholes, if I believe I have that right. And Kathy is now a city councilor in the city of Waltham and is working closely with us on a project to establish a memorial, a Polaroid memorial at 1265 Main Street. Much as Eric did in years past with the memorial at Osborne Street, we want to do something similar, not identical, but similar at 1265. I won't take your time with it now, but I will be hoping that we can put something in the newsletter and talk about it at our follow-up reunion in the fall, because I'll be looking for some folks to work on the project with us. Thank you.
Oh, good, it works. I would like to introduce your current PRA board members. As I read your name, would you just raise your hand, please? We'll start with Arthur Asnavorian, Jim Bodkin, Dan Sensei, Peter Clark, Don Foster, Karen Firsty Friedman, Tui Jackson, Paul Lubin, Mary McCann, Bill Rosen, Bob Ruxell, Ruth Scanlon, Phil Souza, George Stebbins, and our newest member, Drew Webb. We would also a special thanks to Mary Ann Hall, who, although is no longer a board member, continues to keep us updated with condolences. So thank you also to Mary Ann. This year, there are 3 members of the board who are retiring, and we would like to recognize them for all that they have contributed. We have a gift, and Bill Rosen.
Thank you very much.
Bill has just been the technology heart of the PRA. He's maintained the website, he's assisted in the publication of the newsletter, created the Zoom links so that we could get together, drove the process that gets the snail mails out to everyone. His patience and good humor have always been front and center, no matter what our needs. He never refused a request unless it was physically impossible. He often shared thoughtful comments and humorous observations. Like many Polaroid people, Bill often saw the need and volunteered to handle something before many of us knew there was a difficulty. And you knew from the newsletter that it has taken a handful of people to replace everything that he has done. Bill, we wish you the best in your future endeavors. Thank you. Thank you.
I want to say thank you to each and every one of you for being a part of my Polaroid family. It has been my pleasure.
Well, our board member, Arthur Asmorian, is leaving us after 10 years of service. And if you know anything about our board, that's 120 board meetings. And if you know anything about our meetings, you'd understand what a selfless act Arthur has done. Arthur has been our first vice president, our second vice president, our parliamentarian. He served on our audit committee, and he's kind of the SJC of our organization. Whenever we have a constitutional crisis, Arthur is there to straighten us out. So I don't know what's going to happen after he leaves. Probably have some tyranny going on. But anyway, Arthur, on behalf of the PRA, I'm going to wish you the best in your retirement. And if you'd like to come back and be in our meetings, we're happy to make a Zoom window for you. Okay. Thank you, Arthur.
I'm not sure I opened the business meeting, but this is the business meeting. And we will. It's now time to vote for your slate of officers, board members for the next year. Are there any nominations for directors from the floor? There are so many hands raised, I don't know who to call on first. All right, and you can self-nominate. If, after this meeting, someone feels that they want to join this neat group of people, you can always contact us. Now, so there are none. The election of the board members, everyone introduced themselves. The slate you're voting for is the slate that's up on the screen, minus the people who have retired. With no further comment, I would like to vote by voice on this slate of candidates. All those in favor of electing this slate of candidates for another year, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Thank you. All those opposed, say nay. Congratulations. You also have had the minutes from last year's annual meeting on the table. Would someone make a motion to vote to approve those minutes? Would someone second? Thank you. All those in favor of accepting the minutes as proposed indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The minutes are accepted. The audit report? The audit report is next.
Okay, the audit committee consists of myself and Arthur Asnavorian. And in accordance with the requirements of our Constitution, the audit committee, comprised of Arthur and myself, conducted an audit of PRA's financial activities for 2024. Scope of the audit covered deposits, operating expenses, bank accounts, trust interest, and record-keeping procedures. And we are happy to report that the books are in good order, and we certify that the PRA is solvent for fiscal year 2024. Now, I just want to say one more thing. Auditing these books, you get to realize the work that Bob Ruxtell does in just keeping these things together and recording and depositing the checks and cutting checks and paying expenses and things like that. It's a selfless job, and he just does it with panache. So I just wanted to thank you, Bob, for all your work. That's it.
Well, after this heavy schedule, I would like to ask, does anyone want to make a motion to adjourn the business portion of this meeting? Does anyone want to second it? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. All right. Always one. Is this Polaroid or not? All right, we're now coming to the exciting part of the program, which are the speakers. And John, are you introducing Mac? Oh, thank you. Bob, do you want to introduce? Okay. You need notes? I will leave this as it is.
Let's see. Good morning to all of you. My name is Bob Ruxtell, and as Ruthie has already done, I am the treasurer of the PRA and also chair of the membership committee. I'd like to introduce a couple of individuals this morning. Mrs. Mac Booth, who where did she go? Oh, better known to many of you as Dion Lathrop, and her husband, without mention, Mac Booth. Thank you for being with us. Ladies first. Dion worked at Polaroid for 25 years, taking on a variety of special engagements. She is perhaps best known for managing two major events: the corporation's 50th anniversary celebration at Boston College, headlined by none other than Steve Allen and the Pointer Sisters. Let me just ask the group, how many remember that birthday? Oh, great. Wonderful. Yeah. Dion, you're remembered by all. Let's see. The second thing is Dion led a group of all employee meetings at a very important time in our history, when Dr. Land had resigned and Bill McCune and Mac Booth took over, and Dion worked to share with the entire population of the corporation the goals and objectives of those two gentlemen. So we thank you for helping the company along through the years. Now on to Mac. Mac joined Polaroid in 1958. I first met him in 1962 when I began working in W2 in the roll film assembly operation. In 1969, before taking on leadership of the construction and operation of the New Bedford negative manufacturing facility, Mac came to W4 to learn more about negative manufacturing. It was there that I had the opportunity to work more closely with him. I have fond memories of those days, especially one evening when Mac took me out to dinner at the Red Coach Grill in Wayland for an impromptu performance discussion. Do you remember?
Yes.
Yes. Mac transitioned quickly from W4 to New Bedford. And then in 1976, he joined Bill McCune in the Blockhouse as executive VP. In 1984, he was named president, and in 1986, CEO. And finally, in 1991, chairman of the board. Although all through these roles, he never failed to offer a pleasant greeting and a quick chat whenever our paths crossed. My 39 years at Polaroid were exciting and fulfilling, shaped by the innovative and remarkable leadership of Dr. Land, Bill McCune, and Mac Booth. I know many of you share that sentiment and Mac's commitment to us and the second aim. It's an honor to introduce to you Mac Booth. Mac?
I had to bend over to get that glass, and I didn't know if I was going to get up or not, but anyway. Well, thanks, Robert. We do go back a long ways. I do remember those days, and thank you for your kind words. To say the least, it's a pleasure to be here. I was planning to be here last year, and the gallbladder got in the way, and so I wasn't able to make it, but we are here today. I'm here with Dion, and it's a super pleasure. Yikes. Okay. To be with, I wonder if that's telling me something. But anyway, to be with my family. You heard some people talk about family here. Just throw that word out loosely. And it is a pleasure to be with a family like Polaroid. It was a family to me, and it still is. So it's great to be here with my family. And that's, it's a little choky, but I'm happy to be here, really happy to be here. I want to thank Bob for introducing me. I get confused sometimes about those dates, and so I won't forget it before I leave. So, I In preparation for this, I was trying to look back and get that feeling that I get every time I was associated with Polaroid. And I called it the aura of Polaroid. It permeates all of us. And so I thought I'd better look up what Webster said that word meant. And it says that it's an atmosphere that surrounds a person or place. And that atmosphere is what got me here. I was at Cornell in graduate school, and a guy named of Bob Palmer at the time was the head of HR. We call it personnel in those days, and out in Waltham. And he came up to Cornell and did an interview for prospective employees. And so Bob and I chatted. And I did some homework, by the way. I heard of land, but I didn't really think that was anything that I was going to be associated with early, for sure, anyway. But I came down. They offered me an opportunity to take an interview out in Waltham with about 6 or 7 guys that were going to be possible supervisors for me, managers of that division. And it was a wonderful experience for me. I went back to Ithaca and talked to my wife, Frances, and told her about there's something special about this group that I can't really describe to you, but I sure as heck hope they offer me, or at least get me down for these interviews, further interviews. So lo and behold, I did get a letter in the mail saying, come on down. And we did. And the first day, I started on July 1st, 1958. The first day, or maybe it was the second, Dr. Land had those annual all company meetings. I don't know how many of you went to those meetings? Oh, wow. Okay, you're all a bunch of old duffers. I was sitting up in the balcony. I remember that distinctly. Dr. Land walked out. Everybody gave him a big applause and everything like that. And he started pacing like he did. He paced up and down on that rug or whatever was there at the time on the amphitheater. And I don't remember everything he said, but I do remember one of the topics he talked about was supervision. And in that discussion, he said, we don't really need supervisors. And I thought, holy smokes, what am I got into here? And he said that, the supervision blocked the people from expanding and bringing forth their creativity. And supervisors sort of got in the way of that. Well, I thought about that as a challenge. I wasn't really worried about being canned up, being fired. But I looked at it and said, gosh, that's a real challenge to think about. How do you manage people? I hadn't really managed anybody. Well, that's not true. I managed a bunch of people in the Air Force, but I'd never worked. But, well, you can take it, hon. No, I'm going to use it, I think. Oh, did I drop it? Okay. That's the annual meeting. That's the annual report for that year. I think we had $67 million in sales, and we made money, which was always an important thing. It was, I guess it was a challenge to take this on. And so that began my career on a little group of people. They didn't trust me to be a supervisor. or they wanted to examine me, I guess. And so I went to work with 6 people, supervised by by a foreman, by Ernestine Harrington. And she was a tough nut, but she was a wonderful lady, wonderful supervisor. And I learned from her. And after 6 or 7 months, they thought I was at least alive and capable. And I went on an off shift, and I began my career as a management group, in the management group. And this growth brought me in contact with a lot of people that I want to talk about today. You know, when you have a company, like Lance started in the 30s as the Land Wheelwright Laboratories. I guess it might have been even in the late 20s. I don't know. He was just a kid. But he gathered around him some really remarkable people, in my judgment, who really took on not only their gave us not only their technical expertise, but they were good people. They brought that feeling of you could trust, that really cared about you. They were hard guys and gals. They demanded stuff, but it was in an atmosphere of family in a way. Again, it was a wonderful thing. And I want to talk about those people because, as I said, when you start a company, you have to have something you're going to sell. I don't know if too many places make any money if they don't have something to sell. And Land had that. Dr. Land visualized the SX70 camera when he started in 43 getting photography, which was remarkable, I think, that he really visualized that progress to getting, pushing a button, and there's a picture. We went through a lot of sort of different ways of getting a picture over those years. But I'm watching you, John, because you know everything about him. But he had that vision, and he knew how to do it, I think. He set, as he said, nearly impossible goals for people to reach. And I can test that they felt like impossible goals, not nearly impossible. But he gathered around him some really, as I say, remarkable guys. And they started in the 30s. Some of them, even before Polaroid was Polaroid. I want to mention Bill McCune, who was my mentor, so I have a very passionate feeling about Bill. He was a remarkable guy. And I don't think he's received the credit, probably, for everything he did. I don't know if I said this or not, but you have to start with a product. You have to know how to do it. And you have to have a group of people who you can trust and work with for your career to deliver what his thrust was. Well, Bill started in, I think, 39. He had left MIT and went to work for GM and came to Polaroid and in 39. I'm getting dry, excuse me. And he was as I say, a remarkable guy. He really was a backup to Land in many ways. Land had great visions of products, and sometimes those products were introduced to the public maybe a little prematurely. And guys like Bill, and Bill in particular, was the backstop. And he did the engineering, and they got those things rolling. The SX70 camera came out, and it was a very stressful time to get the quality that we wanted out of that product. And Bill was right there like he had been for the one step and and previous cameras. I mean, he was really a remarkable guy. And he had not only great engineering skills, but he had a real heart for the company. Quietly, I mean, he was not the originator, I don't think, of inner city, but he was a strong supporter of it. And I can remember conversations with him about the importance of it. Bill was really quite a character, quite a great guy. He lived to be 102, by the way. I hope that's in the genes or something of the job. I don't know. But anyway, at times I'm not so sure. But anyway, there was a guy by the name of Dick Kriebel, who was in the 30s. It was before Polaroid started. Remarkable guy, little short guy. And he really was the author of the first and second aims of the company. I think Land painted the big picture, but Dick put it together as the first and second aim. He was, as I say, a very gentle but very brilliant guy. Charlie McCullough was in the engineering, the patent world. And I got to know Charlie very well. We had offices next to each other, and Charlie liked to chat about the old times. And I should have brought that clock up here with an alarm so it'll tell me to shut up. But anyway, I'm looking at you, so you got to tell me to. Okay. Charlie was the patent lawyer that defended Land's patent, earliest patent on polarizer sheet. There were two other people who had put patents in on that, but Charlie took that case and won it. And he was a brilliant lawyer, brilliant patent lawyer, but he had a heart as big as this room. And when I knew him, when he was in the general management part of the company, you could feel the feelings that Charlie had about all of us. He looked out for us. He was the go-between between the management and the employees committee. And he served, when Dave Skinner left, he served that role and did it for many years. And he was just a good guy. Otto Wolf. I think Otto was probably either the first or second. I don't know what he was, but he and Land were very close. Now I'll tell you a story about Otto, and I think it depicts kind of this foundation of our company. Land, I think, was in his early 20s when he wanted to get he wanted to sell synthetic polarizer lenses to Kodak. And he and Otto drove up to Rochester. This is Land talking now, not me. They drove up to Rochester in one of Dr. Land's Buick convertibles. And they slept out in the field overnight because they didn't have the money to get a hotel room, I guess. And got up the next morning and got dressed up at a gas station probably or something, and went over to Kodak and sold them on the idea of buying polarizer lenses. So Otto was a character and a half, but a brilliant engineer. And when you scratched just a little bit underneath that skin of his, he was a good guy, a great guy, just an absolute great guy. But I think he might have been the first, I don't know if you call him employee or colleague of Land's when he was, after he left. Well, Wheelwright wasn't, but later in that time of thinking of polarizer, the polarizer lenses, and he helped design all the equipment that was out in Waltham. He's really a wonderful guy. Dave Skinner. Dave Skinner wasn't, Land was a damn genius. I mean, we all know that. He was a genius in the fact of the what's. In other words, he had the ideas, he knew how to do it, but he needed a team to implement that thing, that feeling. And Dave Skinner, he brought in from GE, and Dave ran all the manufacturing, finance, and that part of it. And he was, I think this is, again, it's a part of Land's genius. He needed someone to kind of bring the rowdy people together and get things done. And Dave was the glue that he brought in to do that. He was the general manager of the company when I joined, which he was number 2 in the company. And I had quite a few discussions with Dave. And again, a guy with high morals, high values. And Howie. Can't forget Howie Rogers. I don't know how to describe Howie, other than he was kind, quiet, solid, brilliant guy. And did Howie ever finish college? Okay, he was hired out of a gas station in South Florida. But he was a genius in its own way. He really was, in the whole color world, especially. His patents were the ones that really defeated Kodak. But again, a lovable guy, quiet, but set a high standard of values in my judgment, from my dealings with him. And of course, there was Dr. Land. I got to make sure I clear a little bit. I didn't really know Dr. Land until I got down to Waltham. Down to Cambridge. I had a few experiences with him. We were out, well, actually about 2 years of experiences, but I spent a lot of nights having lunch and dinner, I should say, with Stan Bloom and myself and Nick Hedgeker-Geedes. And they didn't get over easily, they got over easily about 9:30 or 10. And I did that for about 2 years when I was running sort of between Dr. Land and Bill, and doing experiments on trying to improve the color film. Actually, one of those times I did know Land earlier was when, well, 2 times. I went to, in on a Saturday, of course, everything seemed to be on Saturdays, to the garden, Mount Auburn Cemetery, and the public garden, to take pictures with Maroy Morse. So I did have that experience with him, but that was about all until the late 70s and or early 70s. Went before he retired, and I did. But anyway, he had this group of people to get the job done and set the tone, and I believe that's a genius. You read and hear about so many entrepreneurs who don't get that quality of folks around them. They sort of repel them. And he didn't. And they all stayed through thick and thin. And it was, I think, a great credit to him. And it's a genius that doesn't get written about much in my book. You get a lot of works, a lot of talk about Dr. Land's work in physics and chemistry and the starting of polarizers and Polaroid. Talk a lot about how he did it, but there isn't much mention about the folks that really took that thrust that he gave and made it work. And it's a, so this aura that I call this overview of Polaroid, I think is present. I think it's present here. I think it's present when we talk about these people that are up here. And I feel very blessed that I had the chance to be a part of that. It's a real experience that's hard to describe, but I feel good. I feel very good today about this. A practical way of describing this aura was, you remember in the 78 snowstorm, I don't know if you all remember that or not, but that was a corker. We had a lot of employees on their own bring shovels in to shovel out the sidewalks and the parking lots. That is something special. No one asked them to come. They just came and grabbed shovels. When I was out in Waltham, this was. And I'm sure it was true around the company. But I think that's part of that aura that I'm trying to describe that's really, I think, quite unique and quite wonderful. When we were having the takeover attempt by Gold and Disney, one of the directors, real good guy, thoughtful, real good guy, came up to me and said, "Why are you getting so excited and caring so much? It's just a business deal. Come on, just get with it." And I said, "Well, it's more than that. It was somebody that was going to tear up the company, and the only people who were going to benefit from that were the terrors. They were going to tear it up." And so it was, for me, a family that I wanted to hold together and get away from Mr. Gold and Mr. Disney. And we were successful through some very good work with a lot of people. I see that same aura today, here. I saw it up here with the directors, and I think that that's something that we can all remember and feel special about, and I'm getting a winded up thing. So I will do that. Thank you all. And Bob, thank you, and all the folks that have put so much time and effort over the years on the PRA. I read all the newsletters. I have a little problem with the in memoriam things, but I read them. And it's a pleasure to be here. And thank you all for coming. Wow.
It's all his fault.
Well, that was a wonderful reminiscence. Thank you.
Thank you.
And 11, however, now we're going to look a bit to the future. 11 years ago, Chris Bonanno spoke at a luncheon about the impact of Polaroid on society. We might recall at that talk that Shelley Buckler leapt up afterwards and proclaimed Chris an honorary member of the PRA. Now, as editor of the newsletter, I'm not going to implement Shelley's proclamation, but I will ensure that Chris receives our quarterly newsletter by email, so that I know he'll read it.
Chris studied history of science at Johns Hopkins. His interest in both science and history has led him to become a preeminent biographer of current America. His books and his New York Magazine articles and his website, www.polarland.net, all intertwine interesting historical stories with thoughtful social analysis. Take his first book. It weaves three different threads together. First, the history of Polaroid technology. Second, the people who changed from making World War II optics into instant prints. But three, the story of the people around the world who have embraced instant photos in their daily lives. While others have told the story of Polaroid's technology and its employees, Chris alone has studied Polaroid's influence on society. His second book, Ouija, recently won the National Book Critics Circle Award in biography for Flash, the making of Ouija the Famous. A critic wrote about this book, "The Bananas has woven a page turner about a loner New York City police photographer scrambling around New York taking flash pictures at night." Bananas tells the photography story that contains remarkable social impact. Chris, as a senior editor of the New York Magazine, covers the city's infrastructure and their theater critics. Among his articles you'll find on the web, More Bounce in the Once Upon a Mattress Theater Revival, How to Feed Infant Vultures in the Bronx Zoo, The Effect of Congestion Pricing for Tolls on New York City Traffic, namely less traffic, less noise, faster buses, William Saarinen famous Bell Labs Research Campus. It's a fabulous earlier version of the Apple Ring in Silicon Valley. But this fantastic campus has become transmogrified into Apple TV's movie set for Lumen's headquarters in the Severance series. I know my kids know a lot about that, but I'm not a fan. I'm not a regular fan. He also has described the bypass surgery on the 85-mile-long tunnel supplying New York City's 500 million gallons per day of fresh water from the Catskills. And a recent article I found quite interesting that a Jamboni drilled a hole in the Midtown Tunnel under the East River. Chris talked today, Polaroid after Polaroid, will bring us up to date on the continuing story of Instance, including he has introduced Mary and I to Polarcon, and he will tell you what the hell is Polarcon.
Oh my gosh, thank you all. John's been Googling me, clearly. I'm going to switch off laptops and let's see if this works on the first try. Big if true. Unprecedented. The first try. Well, thank you all for having me. Especially Ruthie and John and Mary, of course, and it's good to be back as well. You know, a lot of the people he was talking about are names to me from patent documents and memos and all the stuff I read while I was working on my book. So hearing them sort of come up off the page is valuable and fascinating, especially to me. More generally, I've been here. This is the second time now, and I love talking to Polaroid's old people. Really, they you know, something I think you all know is that Land and those who worked with him loved to hire people for their brains. And so you get a whole room full of smart people talking about interesting things. And that doesn't happen every day. last time I came here, it was 2014. My hair was black. My kid was in preschool. He is now touring colleges. And I thought I was telling the story of a medium and a company that was essentially at the end. It turns out, now that the kid is in high school, we're seeing something very different. And I will preface this, by the way, by saying I'm sure lots of you know bits and pieces of this story. So my job here is to sort of knit it all together for you all. That was February 8th, 2008, was the day it seemed like it was coming apart for good. That is, Polaroid had been through a bankruptcy in 2001, was headed for the second one. The digital world had sort of swept in, and I think a lot of people thought it had won. That was the day the announcement went down that film production was going to be done for good. People were still buying it, instant film, but the business was much smaller, and it didn't really work anymore at the scale. Those plants were built to churn and churn and churn, and working at a much smaller pace would have been very difficult and require some retooling. And the idea they had within the company management at that time was that the demand was going to tail off to zero. Strangely, it didn't. But their perception of demand was that it was about to end. They figured they would make one more big batch, be done in 2009, and that would be that. Fujifilm, which at that time had its own line of cameras and instant film produced in Japan, called Instax, would probably carry on with whatever was left of the market and kind of wind down the instant photography business. The response in the comments thread on the New York Times was predictable and very sad. At that time, I wrote a tiny little story for New York Magazine, where I work, about at the time there was a show of Polaroid photography by Robert Mapplethorpe going up at the Whitney Museum. And so I thought, well, there's a little news item to be written about just as this type of film goes away, it's being celebrated in the art world. And I called up a few people, including Chuck Close, the artist and painter, and he was not nostalgic about it. He was annoyed. He was upset. And I thought, well, that's interesting, And ultimately, that conversation was the tiny germ that led to my writing an entire book, because he suggested that this didn't have to happen. And I wanted to know what happened. Well, what happened, I think you all, yes, do you want to take a moment to boo? You can. That final decision had been in the hands of Tom Petters, about whom you all know. I don't have to tell him about you. He, of course, turned out to have a very substantial reason for winding down, for taking over Polaroid and then winding it down. He was stealing hundreds of millions of dollars from the companies he ran. And in fact, he got caught. In 2060, he will be 97 years old. I'm sure he'll have a wonderful time when he gets out. There was a guy on Flickr, the photography website, who actually proposed making a verb out of him. The part of what he wanted was to sell off the assets, break up what was left of Polaroid, and that included the plants. In 2012, just as I was finishing the book, I actually made a little trip to Waltham myself. And I must say it had been closed by then for, I think, 4 or 5 years. And I must tell you, I am not a rule breaker in my life. I'm a total ninny that way. I hopped the fence and broke in. And saw, the wreckage of what was left inside. It had mostly been stripped, but I did find on the floor, you'll see on the right there, an enormous wrecked Polaroid museum replica that had been framed in some hallway or office somewhere, and was now, if it were a little smaller, I might have tried to stuff it in my car and take it home, but it was, first of all, it was 6 feet long. And second, it was too fragile. If you touched it, the emulsion was all blistered. It had gotten wet, so didn't make it. So the wind down, of course, as many of you know, involved selling off the assets, and the very last plant to go was the one in Enschede in the Netherlands. And I'm sure some of you have followed this story. The day it was closing down, there's this guy named Florian Kaps, an entomologist and entrepreneur, who had been distributing Polaroid film in Europe. And he went to the closing ceremony and fell into conversation with Andre Bosman, who was the plant manager there. And they went out for a beer afterward, and they were sort of bemoaning, this didn't have to happen, this is so sad, you know. And what Andre told Florian was that they hadn't actually demolished the machinery yet. It was supposed to go, this was a Friday, and it was supposed to start on Monday. And as Dr. Capps says, we stopped drinking beer and started talking. And over that weekend, they managed to wrangle some financing and throw themselves in front of the bulldozers for all practical purposes. And they made a pitch to Polaroid's management then, and somehow persuaded them to lease the contents of the building. They incorporated as a company they called the Impossible Project, both because it looked really hard to do, and they were thinking of Dr. Land's famous quote, "Don't do anything unless it is manifestly important and nearly impossible." And it turns out it was even harder than they thought. They had about a year's worth of film to sell so they could have a little income stream, and so they had a year to get the plant going with no supply lines, no ingredients, no employees. A certain amount of the chemistry had been grandfathered in, and once they had stopped production of those ingredients, the EU wouldn't let them be started up again because the rules are tighter now. You all know how hard it was to make film that was reliable and stable. I'm sure some of you, that was your very specific job. The efforts you paid to quality control, you threw away a lot of batches that didn't come out right. They couldn't do that. They had to sell whatever they made. And I have to say, their first film arrived in 2010, and it was awful. That black and white is really how it looked. For one thing, they didn't have the opacifier right. And what that meant was, as the frame ejected from the camera, they advised you to take the cardboard box the film pack had come in, tape it to the front of your camera, and shoot into it to catch it in order to shield it from light. This was not very convenient. Walk around with your camera with a box flapping on the front. In the wind, you could not do it at all. Indoors, the exposure times were all over the place. It was also extremely temperature sensitive. If it was below 50 or above 70, you were sunk. It wouldn't process at all, or your color would go weird or whatever. They started selling these little gel packs that you could keep it at the right temperature with. They told you to slash the pod after you took your picture because it was also unstable. And if you didn't get the humidity out, the photograph would crystallize. The color came along the next year, and well, you can see what it looked like. It could be better. But this was the beginning of something. You may remember that the very first Polaroid film in 1948 was a little brown and a little touchy, and it got better. And they sort of, in a metaphorical way, retraced that passage. And within a few years, Impossible film started to look a lot better. This is, by the way, the kid I mentioned earlier. You can watch him grow up because I've been shooting him since he was born on this stuff. Impossible also introduced a camera called the i1. It's weird looking, isn't it? The flash is around the lens. It was okay. It was strange in the hand, a little too wide to hold comfortably, and the exposure controls were on an app on your phone, so you had to do this to kind of do anything manually. As I said, it was, and the battery was a disaster. They did not put the battery in the film pack like you guys. They had a separate battery that was permanent and installed and did not work very well at all. Anyway, they were trying. They were struggling to get this plane aloft, and you have to admire everything about it, while admittedly saying the product was maybe not all it could be. Something was happening in the world around that time, though. There was an embrace of, at a smaller scale, of things that were not digital, even as the digital world was clearly taking over all our lives. It was not, as some of it was just sort of comfortable nostalgia, but there was something else going on too. And it was, there was an interest in keeping these media alive one way or another. And it happened in all sorts of idioms. As I said, Fujifilm was starting to sell its Instax line in the United States, as it continues to now. And within a few years, that became the best-selling camera in the world, where it remains, last I heard, even today. It was a little bit of an indignity that of all the things to take over at that size, it was one based on the Kodak system. It exposes through the back. But what are you going to do? It became popular, especially among very young people. Teenagers buy this and they use it at parties to this day. And it's you see it everywhere once you're looking for it. The last thing you'd have expected, that the very youngest people who had grown up entirely on digital photography suddenly wanted this other thing. It's only okay as a camera, but it'll do. By the way, Polaroid licensed it for a little while near the end. You could buy the Fujiroid, people called it, It's only okay as a camera. It's, an inexpensive lens. It'll do. The film's very nice. The color's very good. To fill that niche, this company came along called Mint Camera, based in Hong Kong. And it's crazy. They manufacture new instant cameras that take either Polaroid or most of them take Fujifilm, and they're very high quality lenses, and they're crazy. The one on the left is like, it's almost the format of an old roll film camera, with the door on one side and the bellows that pulls out. The one in the middle looks like a Rolleiflex that takes instant film. And the thing on the right is that's not a new camera, that's an old SX70, but they make an electronic flash, small, light, petite, that snaps into the old flash bar slot. And that, I must say, is a terrific product because you can't get flash bars anymore. And if you want to keep using your SX70 camera, as I do, it's nice to have an electronic flash that you can pop in. And it's well made too. I've dropped it a few times and it still works. But it wasn't just cameras. It wasn't just film that was being revived. There's a movement toward pen and paper, even, for people who have literally never learned to write in cursive. Have you encountered this business, the bullet journal? This is a phenomenon a lot of young people use to keep track of their lives. They journal with little bullet points all day long. It's a version of keeping a desk diary, but it is very specific. It's sort of it's a system for making notes to manage your life. And you would think, well, certainly your calendar on your phone is going to be the way to do that. No. They want to get away from the buzzing and the beeping and all of it and make notes with ink in a couple of colors. They find it restful. They find it useful. They find it calming and settling and a way of grounding themselves in contemporary life. Other companies, too, got into this. Moleskine, the Italian notebook people, that company has been growing by leaps and bounds, making inexpensive little notebooks that people love for writing on paper with ink. The real marker for what was going on was the LP, which surely we all thought was finished. The top-selling vinyl record in 2008 sold 25,000 copies, which is what, a hundredth of what it had been in the 1970s, something like that. Not anymore. Not anymore. Something started to happen. Again, records are bought by young people, not nostalgists, but they wanted something. Partly just that's fun as an object. You get great big cover art instead of the little tiny thing on the icon of what you bought digitally. But there's something else they talk about, which is wanting to own your music. Young people listen to most of their music through Spotify, a streaming service to which you buy a license. You subscribe every month. If Spotify goes under tomorrow, they've lost 1,000 albums. If Apple decides to revoke its license for the digital files you bought, you don't have them anymore. If you bought an LP, it's yours. You can play it until it wears out. And there is a movement toward owning your music, which I find enticing myself, And it's certainly not taking place at the scale we saw in the heyday of the LP. But look at these numbers. Ready? 1.5 million copies of an LP sold last year by Taylor Swift. And even in the realm of photography, analog started to find a small-scale revival. Ektachrome, who on earth shoots transparency slides anymore? I can't remember the last time I saw anybody haul out a slide projector, right? Well, the answer is that, and that's why they discontinued Ektachrome film, right? It's back. And one of the hottest shows on television, Euphoria on HBO, they shot an entire season on Ektachrome movie film, 35 millimeter format. Why? This is a show about kids. They wanted it to look like they wanted it to look. And they said digital doesn't look like that. There are even artists who have embraced film that is not, they're not going for it as this is for its depth and beauty. They're going for its rottenness. I will explain. This is a photographer named Susan McCullough. She's an artist working in Wexington, Massachusetts. Lives in Northampton, I think. And she works on Polaroid film that is 10 years past its expiration date. That's her choice of idiom. And what she shoots is sort of like ruined industrial sites and sort of like tragedies of Americana, if you like. And so this sort of like poisonous green, poisonous brown, a horrible polluted color scheme is exactly what she's going for. She wants the thing that you all worked so hard not to do. She craves it. And, you know, that sort of fumed poison look, it took me a while to get my head in the space where I love this stuff, and I did, finally. I got it eventually. I've spent some time with books of her photographs, and it's just wonderful. That said, in the digital world, there is also an understanding of analog culture as more closely related than you think. Not something entirely to be vanquished, but something also to be celebrated for the things it did well. I will give you the example of Instagram, the biggest photo app in the world. That was their icon when they launched. You may recognize it. And I will say that even in the contemporary one, which is when they introduced in 2016, that rainbow color palette is a descendant, you know, of the stripe. I'll also say that, you know, now they're a piece of Facebook. They've been bought and they're in some giant corporate headquarters in California. When they started as a little one office outfit in the Bay Area, you walked into their office and what did you see? They knew. They were thinking about it. There's also a whole world, if you go on a craft site like Etsy, of what I think of as Pola kitsch. And this stuff will just, you've seen some of this, I have no doubt, but it makes me laugh every time. The one on the upper left is a Lego one-step that you can assemble from a kit. It doesn't work as a camera, it's just an object. And if you look at the photo, it's ejecting, it's a little tiny Lego Dr. Land. The Post-it dispenser on the bottom is a real thing. I have it on my desk. I do not have the toilet paper roll. I wanted to order it, and my wife gently said, not everything in our life has to be Polaroid. And the one at bottom right, in case you can't tell, is a cheese slicer. And I will... These are real products that you can buy in the world. People spend money for these things. I don't have the cheese slicer either. There's a good book about all this, if you're so inclined to read more, by David Sachs. It's called The Revenge of Analog, Real Things and Why They Matter. And it's a fun read. It has a whole section about film and notebooks and vinyl and all the rest of it. And he did a lot of reporting. He went and talked to a lot of people who, for example, he went to record pressing plants that used to be idled and are now running so hard that the equipment's breaking, you know. There have also been movies, and I can't believe this is true, and yet I can. There is not a documentary about Polaroid photography. There are 3 documentaries, feature-length documentaries about Polaroid photography. One is about the very beginning of the Impossible Project. It's called Time Zero. This was made by a guy named Grant Hamilton. He's a surgeon who takes a lot of pictures himself. He's in Iowa, I think. There's another one about the rise of the Impossible Project and its success, and it focuses on Doc Capps, the guy I mentioned earlier. I make a tiny appearance in this movie as a talking head, as one of the interviewers in the documentary part of it. I'll tell you a story about making it. It was a crazy, crazy experience. The director is Austrian. He's from Vienna. And they had interviewed me in New York, talking to Doc and a few pleasant couple of hours. And I get a call about 6 months, a year later, and the director says, we want a final scene where everybody involved in the movie is at a big dinner in Vienna. Can you get on a plane? Yes. So I go and I meet them, and we all get on a bus and we go up into the Austrian Alps to a hotel that has been closed for 40 years. They've reopened for one night in this ballroom bigger than this. It's lit by about 1,000 candles, and the director explains that they are shooting this documentary on 35mm film because it's about film, lit entirely by candlelight, no movie lights. I don't know how. And they have a track set up over the long banquet table. So there is a long tracking shot at passing all of us going up to the end, surrounded by candles, where there is an orchestra and a jazz singer performing. And the whole thing is being recorded not only on 35 millimeter film, but also on a shellac disc. They went nuts for analog on this project. And it's a pretty entertaining movie. If you think, how on earth did you know? The third documentary is called Instant Dreams. It's made by a guy from Rotterdam named Willem Baptist. And he wanted to talk about Polaroid enthusiasts. And it centers on 4 principal characters. One is Stephen Hirschen, who some of you may know as a scientist who worked here. He's now in Enschede helping them improve their film. He goes back and forth, but he's there most of the time. The second character is a Japanese teenager who shoots a lot of Instax. The third is a photographer named Stephanie Schneider. She's in Los Angeles, and she works a lot on either expired film or the new stuff. She does fashion photography out in the desert. She's an eccentric, and you can tell very quickly in the movie that she's a fun eccentric. And the fourth of the characters is a guy in New York who takes a lot of pictures of his son. Again, a strange experience of being shot for a movie. I will tell you that this Stephanie Schneider's, one of her photographs makes up the movie poster. I don't know what a model in the desert in a bathtub exactly has to do with instant photography, but it's a cool poster. There's also an alternate poster. I guess she shoots everybody from behind. I don't know. That's me, in case you can't tell. There's also a horror movie. Anybody come across this horror movie? Came out in 2019. It kind of bombed. I will admit, it got trapped. It was a Weinstein Company production, and when the Weinstein Company melted down, it was stuck. It had no distributor. It had no, so they eventually got it out with someone else. I will say, however, that the tagline on the right-hand version of the poster: "Beware this camera. Once you take it, it takes you." It's true. Meanwhile, back at Polaroid, what existed of Polaroid at the time, there was mostly a licensing project because they had gotten out of the film business, and the current owners, which was Hilco Gordon Brothers, basically a private equity partnership, they were trying to get some income and keep the brand alive. So they made a lot of TVs. For example, you've all encountered Polaroid TVs. I imagine it was practically the house brand at some place like Target for a while. They made some electronics. You remember that nice little zinc printer? They licensed zinc back to Polaroid. And they got in a business with this company called Polaroid Photobar. That it was not a terrible idea, but it was a strange one. Photobar was supposed to, they had physical stores around the country, and you were supposed to go in with your memory stick, or your phone, and walk out 15 minutes later with a framed, printed, high quality picture. Not a terrible idea. They couldn't quite find an audience. They opened a bunch of stores, including one that I must tell you about, a giant one in Las Vegas on the Strip. And I bring this up because it was 2 stories, giant store. The bottom story was for their business. They sold cameras and did this printing operation, The second floor, they declared the Polaroid Museum. Huge exhibit of camera history. They had a wax Andy Warhol you could take your selfie with. They had a timeline of every camera. They had a giant, they even had a chair from Dr. Land's office on a little pedestal, like a throne. It was absurd, and it was very glitzy. I went to the opening, and all these sort of like B-list Vegas celebrities were there. It was strange. Elko, you would have died. All the old people who were sort of tasked in the grand days of keeping Polaroid's image smart and elegant would not have gone for this. Ted Voss would have drowned himself if he'd visited. Nonetheless, it was a celebration, albeit a weird one, of this medium. All that licensing did have one notable outcome, which was that the Impossible Project was able to license the Polaroid name eventually. I think they had a deal where the film had to get to a certain quality standard before the owners of the Polaroid trademark would do it, but they did. And a couple years later, Impossible products were renamed Polaroid Originals. By that time, Doc had moved on, and the guy in charge was named Oscar Smolakowski, and he's very young. His family business had acquired Impossible, and he, I think, understands this product and this idiom in a way some of his immediate predecessors did not, in that he is clear-eyed about what they do. He wants to make the film better and better, but he's also not romantic. They don't do a lot of side projects. He wanted to get a camera to market that was really usable, and he wanted the film to get better and better. Sustainable, even production and growth, rather than, going off in wild directions. And to that end, in 2017, what did they bring back? The One Step became the One Step 2, and it's pretty good. It's inexpensive. They can sell it in retailers, in Target or Walmart or what have you, and in fact, you can buy one there today, or its successor. They've moved along a couple models since then. And finally, the name came full circle because Impossible, as I said, owned by Smolakowski's family, they bought the remains of Polaroid from Hilco Gordon Brothers. And it's now just Polaroid film again. That tiny startup running on nothing in Enschede had become Polaroid again. The minnow swallowed the whale. A new camera followed. This is the update to the One Step. Totally, it looks very familiar, doesn't it? They introduced a tiny one called the Polaroid Go using very small format. And just last month, they introduced a higher end, this is from a couple of years ago, a higher end one with a manually adjustable lens if you wanted some control of your own. And just last month, they brought back the one with the flip flash on it. I want to tell you about another place that has embraced this, which is a retailer in Brooklyn, New York. In Bushwick, Brooklyn. It's called Brooklyn Film Camera. Essentially, a couple of young people saw this embrace of analog and went all in on it. And they opened this tiny little business. They started as a flea market kiosk, but they soon had a real store in 2015. This is a niche community, but it turns out to be a bigger niche than you might expect it. You might have expected. I want to show you how enthusiastic it is. That store opened 10 years ago this month. It's pretty. You will notice the old sign in the window. You go inside, and it has the vibe of an old photo shop, doesn't it? And you don't have those anymore. You don't see them. They're almost gone. They sell film. They sell accessories. They refurbish old Polaroid cameras and repair them. If you bring in yours, they'll fix it. And because they refurbish and offer a warranty, wait till you see the prices. Can you read them on there? 680 SLR is almost $1,000. People are paying it. They also, the Brooklyn Film Camera people also got involved with a group called Policon, which John and Mary mentioned. It started in Austin, Texas, I believe, as a convention where all sorts of enthusiasts could come and take pictures of one another and share notes and just embrace their own community and their enthusiasm. And they did it in Austin for a few years. Now there are spin-offs. There's one in the Bay Area. And 2023, they did it for the first time in New York City. I went last year. It's wild what you see. First of all, I have never seen so many Polaroid tattoos anywhere in my life. It's that sort of culture. But you also see these crazy camera modifications. This guy has a 1930s Graflex that has a back grafted on it to take Instax film. This guy has an even more elaborate version of that, and that lens is probably turn of the century, that big brass barrel lens, and but turn of the 20th century. This guy's shooting with a Model 110? When was the last time you saw a Model 110 out in the wild, right? This guy is using the tiny new Polaroid Go. You'll notice he has an SX70 and a leather case around his neck also. He goes back and forth, I guess. My favorite moment, John already spoiled this, I suppose, was just I ran into them surrounded by the enthusiasm. I wish you could have been there just to see the enthusiasm amongst these very young people who were like, "You're there. You're really there." They had a all but an altar of Dr. Land, a giant picture of him up. Some schmuck interviewed them on stage too. I will close out with a couple of little contemporary stories. In the back of that store in Brooklyn Film Camera, there is another Polaroid museum, but it is not a big glitzy Las Vegas thing. It's all heart. And it's from people who really care and are trying to keep this flame going. And it's very nice. There's an object in there that I just love. And when I was there last week for their 10th anniversary party, and I saw this, and literally I think the next day or 2 days later or something, Polaroid released its latest batch of SX70 film. They produce it a few times a year, and they had changed the box this time just for the one. They went right back to the stripes. They are now running machinery that's more than 50 years old. Enschede opened in 1972. And, you did have to wonder if that stuff is aging. Well, it turns out that new Polaroid, this new form of Polaroid, is so successful that they have managed to, I guess they have the money now, because they're going to build a new factory in the next town over so that they have fresh machinery that runs reliably and consistently, and they can ramp up production. So they're going to, I think they're going to close down the Enschede plant and replace it with all new stuff. But what a wild thought that they can build a new instant film plant in 2026. I would never have thought it possible. Certainly not a dozen years ago when I was here talking about the tail end of everything. One other thing I want to tell you about, some of you may know this, I'm sure, because it's being promoted in Boston right now, but next week, The American Experience on PBS is airing an episode devoted to someone you may recognize. I make a small appearance in this one, but it's pretty good. I've seen it. I have to admit, I am slightly disappointed in the title, because I feel as though a whole lot of people in this room, in addition to him, have a lot to do with this story. But we'll take it. And I have here the trailer, if you'd like to see 90 seconds or 2 minutes worth of whatever it is. Oh, hang on.
It was always with you. Take a wallet out of my pocket and perhaps open the wallet, press a button, close the wallet, and have the picture.
It's one of the most instantly recognizable brands ever.
I can't imagine a world without the Polaroid.
It was truly revolutionary in the real sense of the word.
A camera which you would use as often as your pencil or your eyeglasses.
This camera made photography accessible and portable. That is groundbreaking.
If we look at early photography, we had heavy equipment.
You shot your film, put it in an envelope, and you mailed it off to be processed.
The holy grail is to press the button, the camera does the rest.
Photography will never again be the same after today.
When Edwin Land started showing this camera, everybody went wild.
Everyone is bitten by this desire to take pictures.
Every significant invention must come to a world that is not prepared for it.
He was a scientist first and a businessman second.
He didn't really care about money. He was interested in innovation.
Land was driven by technology. It wasn't about ethics, it was about the product.
For him, the Polaroid camera is something that society needs, and he must deliver.
Polaroid was the Apple computer of the 50s and 60s. Steve Jobs would tell you that Land was his idol in many, many ways.
Not many people can see that something is significant until after it is done.
Monday night. I thought that was going to be my last slide, and then 2 days ago I was walking on the Upper East Side, and I passed a clothing store called Aerie. This is not a niche store. This is not a Brooklyn Bushwick enthusiast spot. This is as mainstream a store as it's a mall store called Aerie. They have a big outlet on Lexington Avenue across the street from Bloomingdale's. That was the window. You know what the jingle was for the Swinger, right? Thanks so much for having me here. Do you need your laptop back?
No.
Okay.
We'll wing it.
Yours? Well, you can plug in if you want. Or
Not to bother.
no, you don't need it? Well, it's there if you do. There you go. All yours.
I'm sorry all this technical stuff gets in the way. My thank you very, very much to our two speakers today. For me, it brought back a lot of memories, a lot of the people that we worked with, a lot of the pride that we took in what we did. Just the joy of discovering simple things. What most impressed me about Polaroid was the second aim, that as a supervisor, I was rated on how well I helped the people who reported to me develop. Quick, funny story. A person came in, and in the mornings they would go for arithmetic and math, and then they'd come to the lab for training in the afternoon. This particular person had never had any company experience, had been so she came, and I was trying to tell her how to cut a particular component in a reagent in half. And she sort of gave me this blank look. And I said, it's like chocolate chip cookies. You just put in half as many chips. And I thought it was I'm not a cook. I thought it was a brilliant idea. And yeah, she kind of, yeah. So about a month later, she was talking about cooking something, and I looked at her and she said, Ruthie, it's like a reagent. You put in half the antifoggans. My fun at Polaroid. Here we are. Oh, yeah, I'm delighted too. Okay. My slide says what you don't see. It is time to socialize. I thank you all for being here. Some people didn't report in and register and get your tickets. Now would be the time to do it. And at this point, I don't know what happens next. Yes? You have a parking ticket. The one you got as you pulled in and took it out of the machine is not the one you want. You want the one that Dawn has been handing out. And Karen's holding it up right now. So if you don't have one of those, that means that you get out of here cost-free for parking. Is that correct? Okay, so be sure you have one of these tickets. Any other comments before we close down? The cash bar is open. My final words to a group of people I know will take advantage of that. Thank you all for being here.